At the end of 2025, the world is not asking who started the wars. It is asking who can stop them. Ceasefires appeared across the globe. Battles slowed. Diplomats returned to the table. Yet one war refused to end: Ukraine. And behind that war stands the most powerful nation on earth, the United States. Why did America stop some wars, but not this one? Is this a failure of leadership or a deliberate strategy? Because the answer will decide the future of global power. At the end of 2025, the world is not divided between peace and war. It is divided between wars that were stopped and one war that was not. From the Middle East to selective regional conflicts, ceasefires emerged. Headlines spoke of diplomacy. Markets breathed again. Yet one battlefield continued to burn: Ukraine. And behind that burning battlefield stood the most powerful country on earth, the United States of America. This is not a story of good versus evil. This is a story of power, interests, limits, and strategy. To understand why Donald Trump could push ceasefires in several wars, but failed in Ukraine, we must understand where the United States truly stands in world politics today. In part 1 of this video, we are going to discuss about the power of the United States in 2025 without illusions. The United States enters the end of 2025 as the most powerful actor in global politics, but not the most comfortable one. America is no longer the uncontested superpower of the 1990s. China challenges economically. Russia challenges militarily. Regional powers challenge diplomatically. Yet no global crisis moves forward without American involvement. This is the paradox of US power in 2025: less dominance, but more responsibility. Donald Trump's foreign policy approach is simple in theory and brutal in execution. He does not believe in endless wars. He does not believe in ideology-driven intervention. He believes in leverage, pressure, and deals. This is why Trump pushed for ceasefires where wars drained American resources. Strategic returns were minimal. Stability benefited U.S. trade and influence. In these conflicts, peace was profitable. Trump presented himself not as a global policeman, but as a global negotiator. But in Ukraine, why did not fit Trump's model? Actually, Ukraine was different. Ukraine is not a local war. It is a system war. Ending Ukraine through a quick ceasefire would require accepting Russian territorial gains, weakening NATO credibility, sending a signal that force works. For the United States, that price was too high. Thus, even Trump's deal-making instincts hit a strategic wall. What is America's real position in world politics at the end of 2025? By late 2025, America stands in 3 roles simultaneously: security provider, especially for Europe; economic gatekeeper through sanctions; finance, trade strategic, referee deciding which conflicts escalate and which freeze. Ukraine sits exactly at the intersection of all 3 roles. Ukraine's war exposed Europe's dependence. This is the unspoken reality. The Ukraine war exposed a truth Europe avoided for decades. Without American intelligence, logistics, weapons, and coordination, Europe cannot fight a high-intensity war. This dependence strengthened US leadership, even as Europe paid the economic price. For Washington, this is strategic reinforcement, not charity. The major question right now is why the war continues still. Basic reason of this war is America does not fight in Ukraine. America manages Ukraine. By supplying weapons but limiting escalation, the U.S. bleeds Russian military capacity, tests modern warfare, strengthens NATO unity, avoids direct confrontation. This balance defines America's global posture in 2025. The core question is created that Trump stopped some wars. But Ukraine continued, not because peace was impossible, but because peace on Russia's terms was unacceptable. And that leads to the deeper question: is the United States seeking peace in Ukraine, or strategic advantage through controlled conflict? What are the hidden motives of the United States behind the Ukraine war? Wars are often explained with emotions, but they are driven by interests. At first glance, America's involvement in Ukraine appears moral: defending sovereignty, resisting aggression, protecting democracy. But world politics does not operate on morality alone. It operates on power calculations, strategic depth, and long-term positioning. To understand why the United States could push ceasefires in several global conflicts, yet remain firmly committed to Ukraine, we must strip away slogans and examine the real motives behind American policy. Ukraine is not just a battlefield. It is a strategic instrument in a much larger global contest. Motive 1. Containment of Russia, not its destruction. The primary American motive in Ukraine is containment, not conquest. Washington does not seek the collapse of Russia. A collapsed Russia would be unstable, unpredictable, and potentially more dangerous. Instead, the United States seeks to limit Russia's ability to project power beyond its borders. Ukraine provides the perfect containment ground. Russia is militarily engaged, its resources are drained, its attention is fixed inward. This reduces Moscow's capacity to influence Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. From Washington's perspective, this is strategic efficiency, achieving containment without deploying American soldiers. Motive TWO NATO credibility and alliance survival. NATO is more than a military alliance. It is the backbone of American global leadership. If Russia succeeded in Ukraine without consequences, NATO's credibility would collapse. Smaller allies would question whether American security guarantees truly mean protection. By backing Ukraine, the United States sends a clear message: borders cannot be changed by force. Alliance-backed resistance works. American commitments are not symbolic. Ukraine thus becomes a test case, not just for Russia, but for every U.S. ally watching from Europe to Asia. Motive 3. European dependence as strategic leverage. The Ukraine war revealed a truth Europe tried to avoid for decades. Its security still depends on the United States. European militaries lack strategic airlift, advanced intelligence, missile defense coordination, large-scale logistics. America fills all these gaps. This dependence strengthens Washington's influence over European security decisions, defense spending, and long-term alignment. From an American viewpoint, Ukraine has re-anchored Europe firmly within the U.S. strategic orbit. Motive 4. The military-industrial reality. The Ukraine war revived high-intensity industrial warfare, something the West had not faced in generations. Missiles, artillery shells, air defense systems, all were consumed at unprecedented rates. The United States emerged as the primary supplier, the technological leader, the production hub. This does not mean the war was engineered for profit. But it does mean America's defense ecosystem was uniquely positioned to benefit and expand influence. European rearmament increasingly relies on American systems, reinforcing long-term interoperability and dependency. Motive 5 is the most important motive: energy and economic repositioning. One of the least discussed but most powerful impacts of the Ukraine war is energy geopolitics. Europe's break from Russian energy created a massive vacuum. The United States moved quickly to fill it with liquefied natural gas, energy infrastructure partnerships, long-term supply contracts. This reshaped transatlantic economic ties and reduced Europe's strategic vulnerability while increasing America's economic leverage. Sanctions further reinforced U.S. dominance over global financial access, payment systems, and trade flows. Motive 6 is another serious factor: the message to China. Ukraine is not only about Russia, it is about China. Beijing is watching closely how the West responds to territorial aggression, how sanctions work over time, how alliances mobilize under pressure. For Washington, Ukraine serves as a strategic signal, demonstrating that military action carries long-term economic and political costs. This message is aimed as much at the Indo-Pacific as it is at Eastern Europe. Hence is a question why a quick peace was never America's goal. A fast ceasefire in Ukraine would likely involve territorial concessions, Russian strategic validation, weakening of deterrence. From Washington's perspective, such a peace would be unstable and strategically damaging. Instead, the United States prefers a managed conflict, one that weakens Russian capabilities while avoiding direct NATO-Russia war. This is cold logic, but it explains policy consistency across administrations. The moral narrative vs. the strategic reality. Publicly, America speaks of democracy, freedom, and international law. Privately, policymakers speak of balance of power, escalation control, long-term rivalry. Both narratives coexist. Ukraine fights for survival. America calculates for position. This dual reality defines the war's continuation. Risks of this strategy. This approach is not without danger. Prolonged war risks escalation. Public fatigue grows, allies strain under economic pressure, miscalculation remains possible. History shows that prolonged proxy conflicts often escape control. The United States believes it can manage these risks. History is less certain. Now the deeper truth is that Ukraine war continues not because peace is impossible, but because peace without advantage is unacceptable to major powers. For the United States, Ukraine is a battlefield of influence, credibility, and future deterrence. And this leads to the next question. If Ukraine reshaped American power, how has it reshaped the world itself? How the Ukraine war reordered the world. Some wars end with borders changed. Some wars end with governments fallen. But a few rare wars do something far bigger. They reorder the world system itself. By the end of 2025, the Ukraine war has become one of those wars. It has reshaped Europe's security thinking, global economics, alliance structures, and the psychology of power. And at the center of these consequences stands the United States, not as a participant on the battlefield, but as the main force shaping the aftermath. To understand where the world is heading, we must understand what this war has already changed. Europe transformed. From comfort to confrontation. Before 2022, Europe believed war was a memory. Defense budgets were low, energy was cheap. Security was outsourced to NATO, and ultimately to Washington. Ukraine shattered this illusion. By late 2025, Europe is militarizing at a scale unseen in decades. Defense spending has surged, conscription debates have returned, arms production has restarted, civil defense planning is back. The continent that once defined peace now prepares for uncertainty. This transformation did not weaken America's role, it strengthened it. Europe's strategic dependence deepens. The war exposed Europe's limits. European armies lack strategic airlift, satellite intelligence, missile defense integration, command and control depth. The United States provides all of this. As a result, Europe's security dependence on Washington has increased, not decreased. Despite political talk of strategic autonomy, in reality, NATO has become more American-led than ever. Economic warfare, the invisible frontline. The Ukraine war opened a new era of economic warfare. Sanctions were deployed at a scale never seen before. Banking systems were cut, reserves were frozen. Trade routes were reshaped. The US dollar's central role in global finance gave Washington unmatched leverage. But this also had global consequences. Energy prices surged, inflation spread, supply chains fractured. Europe paid the highest price but accepted it for security. Energy geopolitics, a permanent shift. One of the most lasting impacts of the war is energy realignment. Europe's dependence on Russian gas collapsed. New suppliers emerged, especially the United States. American LNG became a strategic commodity, not just an economic one. This shift reduced Russia's leverage, increased EU economic integration, locked Europe into long-term Western energy structures. Energy became a weapon, and America controlled the flow. The Global South caught in the middle while the West rallied around Ukraine. Much of the Global South remained cautious. Many countries avoided taking sides, rejected sanctions, prioritized economic survival. This revealed a fractured world order. The Ukraine war did not unite the globe, it divided it into competing interpretations of power and justice. For Washington, this meant influence but also resistance. The psychological effect of prolonged war on the world. Perhaps the most underestimated impact is psychological. The Ukraine war normalized long wars, drone warfare, civilian vulnerability, permanent instability. Societies across Europe began to think differently about security, survival, and sacrifice. Fear of escalation, even nuclear, quietly returned. This fear explains why British military leadership warned in 2025 that the world is closer to major war than at any point in modern history. World War III, why the fear is real but controlled. Talk of World War III is no longer dismissed as alarmist. It is discussed seriously, not because leaders want it, but because miscalculation is possible. Ukraine is dangerous because NATO and Russia operate in proximity, red lines are tested constantly, escalation control relies on restraint. The United States acts as the primary stabilizer, deciding what weapons are sent, when and how. This restraint is deliberate. America does not seek global war, but it accepts global tension. China watching from the sidelines, no country studies Ukraine more carefully than China. Beijing observes. Western unity under pressure, economic warfare effectiveness, the limits of military power. Ukraine shapes China's calculations about Taiwan, alliances, and long-term strategy. For Washington, this indirect influence is critical. Ukraine is not only a European war, it is a lesson broadcast to the world. The cost to the United States America has gained influence, but paid a price. Political polarization increased. Budget pressures grew, strategic focus stretched. The U.S. now manages multiple global fronts simultaneously. Power is preserved, but not without strain. All these events are signals of that the world cannot stable in this war condition. By the end of 2025, the world is not at peace, but it is not yet at total war. The Ukraine conflict has created a new normal: armed peace, permanent rivalry, strategic uncertainty. And this leads to the final unavoidable question. Can the United States control the system it has helped reshape, or will that system eventually escape its grip? 2026 and beyond, the limits of American power and the future of the world. Every great power reaches a moment when its strength is no longer measured by how much it can control, but by how much chaos it can prevent. As the world moves toward 2026, the United States stands exactly at that moment. After pushing ceasefires in several conflicts, after sustaining Ukraine without direct war, after reshaping alliances and economies, America now faces a deeper question. Has it stabilized the world, or merely postponed a greater storm? The answer will define the next decade of global politics. The three paths ahead for Ukraine in 2026. By early 2026, the Ukraine war presents three possible futures, each shaped by American choices. 1. A negotiated peace, a negotiated settlement is possible, but fragile. It would likely involve unspoken territorial compromises, security guarantees without full victory, a divided but quieter Ukraine. For Washington, this path reduces risk, but threatens credibility if perceived as weakness. Peace would not end rivalry. It would freeze it. 2. A frozen war, most likely. The most realistic outcome is a frozen conflict. Fighting continues at low intensity. Front lines stabilize. Sanctions remain. Tensions persist. This allows the United States to maintain pressure on Russia, avoid escalation, preserve NATO unity, but frozen wars are not peaceful. They are unstable pauses. 3. Escalation, the dangerous path. The least likely but most dangerous scenario is escalation. This would not come from intention. It would come from miscalculation. A missile goes too far. A red line is misunderstood. A response becomes irreversible. This is why American restraint remains critical. Trump's dilemma in 2026. Donald Trump faces a strategic contradiction. He wants fewer wars, lower costs, faster deals, but Ukraine resists quick solutions. If Trump pushes too hard for peace, he risks weakening American deterrence. If he sustains the war, he risks endless entanglement. This dilemma defines his foreign policy legacy. Can America still control escalation? For now, the United States acts as the primary regulator of escalation. It controls weapon quality, intelligence sharing, alliance coordination, but control is not permanent. As wars drag on, unpredictability grows. History warns that prolonged proxy conflicts often escape the control of even the strongest powers. The limits of sanctions and pressure sanctions have weakened Russia but not broken it. Moscow adapted, alternative trade routes, energy redirection, domestic mobilization. This reveals a limit to economic warfare. Pressure can slow a rival, but rarely transforms it. The future of NATO and Europe enters 2026 more armed, more alert, but still dependent. NATO remains strong, yet stretched. America's leadership remains essential, but questioned. The alliance now exists in a permanent state of readiness, a costly but necessary condition. China, Taiwan, and the next test, Ukraine's shadow extends to Asia. China has learned. Speed matters, sanctions hurt, alliances mobilize. This makes Beijing cautious but not passive. For Washington, preventing simultaneous crises in Europe and Asia is the ultimate strategic challenge. Is the United States a peacekeeper or a power manager? By 2026, one truth becomes clear. The United States is no longer trying to end all wars, it is trying to manage instability. This is not idealism, this is survival in a multipolar world. Peace is no longer permanent. It is temporary and conditional. Final conclusion: the judgment of history. The Ukraine war will be remembered not only for its battles, but for what it revealed. It revealed the fragility of peace, the return of great power rivalry, the limits of military dominance, the enduring power of alliances. America stands neither victorious nor defeated. It stands responsible for what comes next. At the end of video, a warning to the future of world is that Ukraine was not the beginning of global conflict. But it may decide how future conflicts are fought or prevented. The United States still holds the balance. Whether it tips towards stability or toward a wider storm will be the defining story of the next era. Ending line for the world: great powers do not fall when they lose wars. They fall when they mismanage peace.